Hello. All right, my last couple of videos I did downstairs where there's less light or where I don't know where all the light switches are, so it was kind of dark and mysterious. But now I'm doing this one in my room where I know where the light switches are, so it's more light. Um, so let's see. Um, Jimmy Dore just did another video about the Rittenhouse acquittal. He had an expert on, like, criminal justice expert, black guy that like analyzed the whole situation and showed that, you know, uh, basically that anybody should have been acquitted in that situation. He agreed that with the leftists that basically a black person might have been more likely to be convicted than a white person. And that might be true, but I think it might also depend on who's in the jury, where it takes place, etc. Like if it takes place in I don't know, a place that's yeah, if it's I mean it's basically I don't really see honestly how it matters because the people that Kyle shot were white. So I guess you could say if the shooter was black and the people he shot were white, then maybe, a rural Wisconsin jury might have found him guilty. But who knows? You can't assume that. I mean, there's times when juries come through and defy the expectations. Um, but it's just a strange thing, like the fact that people are I guess it just goes to the heart of like the problem with society in general. Is people don't understand that like in Lakesh, like the Mayans said, in Lakesh means like that was a greeting that they would say to each other. The Maya people of Mesoamerica, pre-Columbian, would say in Lakesh, meaning supposedly, or how I've seen it translated as you are another me or I am another you. Um, and but I mean, politically, that's very much true because one person's rights is another person's rights. Like um, when somebody defends the right of free speech, that helps you and me to have our rights of free speech. And, when somebody defends their life, that establishes my right and your right and everybody else's right to defend their life. Um, but yeah, anyway, I mean, it's just weird. Like, you know, I wouldn't expect to have to make so many videos to defend some like uh conservative guy. But when my supposed fellow leftist, quote unquote, I mean honestly the left nowadays is fucking garbage. Like I would guess there's at least as many self-proclaimed leftists who are evil scum who only call themselves leftists because that's what the college professors and the TV tell them that they're supposed to say, but they don't have any fragment of a fucking like uh you know of a fucking fleck of affinity for actual leftists, anything. It's just a whole LARP. That's the thing is like all these leftists, like the richest places are all leftist, quote unquote. Like London is like a leftist place. Europe is supposed to be like leftist. Um, California is supposed to be leftist, but it's not. You know, all they gave us medical marijuana, right? Which is not a traditional leftist thing because when leftism was invented, the Christians and the, suffragettes had not yet banned all these. I mean, I don't know. I've heard some people say that basically once women got the vote, a lot of them were Christians controlled by their husbands, and they immediately banned alcohol and then banned every other drug. So I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, white women are pretty much just as bad as white men in terms of uh, fascism. Um, so, but yeah, like when leftism started, nobody had thought to ban marijuana, so it wasn't like part of that. Um, it was actually the progressive movement that banned drugs. So I don't know if the progressive movement in the 20s or whatever considered itself leftist or just considered itself high-minded Christian eugenicists or something. I don't know what. But yeah, like California is not leftist. Like who was it? The guy who wrote about the populist movement that they had him on Useful Idiots a lot with Matt Taibbi and Katie Halper, um, maybe Frank somebody or something. Anyway, he explained how like in the 60s there was a big switcheroo in the left where they basically kicked out all the actual working class people by reinventing leftism as a college educated urban enlightened person uh rebellion against rural uh rural plebes basically. um so I don't know exactly, I don't know how deliberate that is. I mean, certainly, um I would say that the hippies were good in the sense that they pushed a lot of the boundaries, and a lot of the old left was culturally right wing in a sense, or not. I don't know if you could say culturally right wing, but culturally conservative in the literal sense, in that a lot of them were not very open minded about a lot of cultural issues. They just they were just focused on class issues. Um, so I mean, I don't know. I'm glad that if hippies push the boundaries of like what you can smoke, what you can wear, what you can whatever. Um, I mean, I would say I'm sure probably Stalin and Mao and maybe Fidel, they probably banned a bunch of the drugs, and they probably did all the same fascist shit that, the US like progressives did, and to try and like end any kind of like uh, hint of freedom. Um, but like but yeah, I mean, it's considered to be now like leftist. I mean, I'm very glad that California, legalized weed. That's good. But we did that. That was us, the people who did that, not Gavin Newsom. And I guarantee you, if we hadn't done it, Gavin Newsom would never do it. Ever. Ever. Nobody would ever do it. Like there were polls showing that the vast majority of Californians supported legalization in like the 90s, and no politician, no Democratic politician ever lifted a fucking finger to actually enact the will of the people. Um, but at least they allowed us to do it, I guess. What can you say? They allowed us to vote for legalization. Um, but it's just funny how people pretend that like the Democrats are like leftists and communists and socialists and shit. Like the right wingers pretend this, and the Democrats sometimes pretend this. And it's fucking dumb, like in both cases, because obviously, I mean, there have been real leftists. I mean, the Democratic Party is always very adamantly anti socialist. They're always like every major Democrat always has to like publicly affirm their faith in capitalism and their fidelity to capitalism. Um, and so like honestly, if we're gonna have a real left in this country, we're gonna have to build it not out of the current left. In fact, at least maybe half of the people or more in the current left cannot be a part of any kind of actual left because they're part of the fake left. They're part of the thing that was created to keep us down. The people who are like, they basically hate poor people and they hate guns and what else do they believe in? I don't know, something about like LGBTQ or something like that, right? But they basically have no beliefs. They basically do whatever the TV tells them. It's so obvious that it's fake. And I don't know if there is a way. There are a lot of people who assume that the Democrats are the left because they just keep being told that. And if you just keep hearing something enough times, even though almost nobody in the Democratic Party has ever referred to themselves as the left. Like I don't like I've been even watching fucking mainstream news because my landlord watches that shit. And I don't think I've ever once seen any Democratic politician say we are the left. No. And I certainly never seen them say anything about socialism. Only Bernie Sanders like once mentioned it or something. But yet this is just assumed to be the left because because you know, I guess even though it's rarely called the left by itself, um, it's called the left by the right, and at least by itself, like they would call themselves once in a while the Dems might call themselves either left or like center left or something. They wouldn't admit that they're right wing. The Democratic Party usually will never admit they're right wing. Like sometimes they'll admit they're conservative, which is the same means the same thing. Biden admitted he was conservative on almost every issue. Uh, Obama admitted that his policies were basically a moderate Republican from the 70s or something, like basically Nixon. Um, I don't know. I really feel like at this time, I guess I've always felt like this, that there's so many people that are so like evil, like maliciously evil, that nothing short of like some sort of civil war or at least some way to neutralize those people, that nothing else will like save humanity. I mean, I guess maybe if at least we could marginalize those people, but essentially now, the worst people imaginable are in charge of society. So it's not very easy to marginalize them. It's not easy to marginalize Bill Gates or Klaus Schwab or you know Joe Biden. But I mean, honestly, I think that Kyle Rittenhouse is an important, like, honestly, for the people who are just so used to just assuming, like, oh, there's some white guy, he's a conservative and had a gun, therefore he's the devil. Like, I feel like people who think that way are saboteurs because it's common sense that there's no hope for humanity unless the working class unites. Like nobody with a brain cell can think, unfortunately, I wish it were true that like just like people of color could somehow just overthrow. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. But I think it would be a tall order for just people of color to be able to like have their own revolution and somehow overthrow the whole like empire. I think that if we're going to be at all realistic, at all honest, we have to say that the whole working class, or at least broad segments of the working class, including white people, need to unite for there to be really any solid reason to hope that we're going to succeed in, ending tyranny. Um, like, so for me, being an actual leftist and not one of these LARPing scum from the coasts who just pretends they're leftist because that's what they're supposed to do. I mean, that's the thing. It's like if you encounter leftist principles and you see, like, okay, leftism, it's about like s- saying that basically tyranny is unjust, whether it's the drug laws, whether it's extreme property inequality, um, both are equally unjust. And some people, they have something inside them um, that reacts against that and is mortified, whatever, and angered by that and wants it to end. I think that's, a small proportion of the visible prominent leftists. Like most of the visible prominent leftists, quote unquote, the visible prominent self-proclaimed leftists, I think most of them are fake. Or else they wouldn't be allowed to have their prominence. They would be like me, banned every month off social media. Like the visible prominent self-proclaimed leftists are mostly just tools of the elites to try to pretend there's some quote unquote left. Um, I mean, it kind of shocks me sometimes how much Republicans shill for capitalism, seeing as right now, like, because the Republicans have become somewhat populist and they support things like the Constitution, the right to bear arms, stuff like that. Therefore, they've pissed off the ruling class because the ruling class doesn't has never liked the Constitution. The ruling class tried to give us a constitution without a Bill of Rights in, the 1700s, and it was the plebes, the unwashed masses of the inland, sticks that basically forced the Bill of Rights on them. And so like those people, so like the primary enemy of the conservatives, of the Republicans, is basically the capitalists, the rich people. And the primary enemy of the rich has become the conservatives. Because the leftists would be a threat to the rich, but they're not because they're fake. If they were real leftists, if we had an actual left in the US that was about real like redistribution of property and real like class consciousness, class solidarity, then that would be, of course, the number one threat and the number one enemy of the ruling class. But we don't have anything resembling that. We have a bunch of like scum that are like basically bourgeois or wannabe bourgeois college fucking wokies that hate the working class. and yet refer to themselves as leftists. Um, so the ruling class is fine with them. The ruling class is cool with the pseudo left. The ruling class is against the conservatives, the Republicans, because even though the Republicans almost have no principles, the few principles that they have retained, they're actually retaining them. You know, they actually have like the right to bear arms and the right to free speech, which the ruling class has never supported the right to free speech. The ruling class has never supported the right to bear arms. And so now the pseudo left, all these college like tools, they they're the they're the greatest like, you know, allies of the ruling class because they try to keep their fellow workers disarmed. They try to keep their, or not even their fellow workers. I mean, a lot of them are professionals, but they try to keep workers disarmed. They try to keep workers fighting each other, um, you know, and so the ruling class loves them. I mean, it might not really love them because who can love like scum like that? But at least like it values them. So the ruling class is basically against the Republicans, but the Republicans still defend the ruling class because fundamentally, the Republicans, they still at least seem to think or claim that their fundamental enemy is socialism and communism, which is to say that their fundamental goal is to protect the ruling class and to stop there from being any kind of rearrangement of the classes and of property. So, so yeah, I mean, ultimately, yeah, the ruling class owns both sides, but but you know, when they're throwing so many people in jail, like for January 6th and stuff, or January 5th, January 6th, I keep forgetting, keep like not knowing which day that was, like the supposed coup. But you know, there has to be, I feel like there has to be some point where Republicans wake up and realize that the capitalists are not their friends and they need to stop shilling and shilling for people that hate them. Because fundamentally, Republicans spend all their waking hours defending property rights of the ruling class who fucking hate them. So they're the biggest cucks. I mean, I would say Democrats are not, I mean, Democrats are cucks, but not in the way that Republicans think they are. Like Republicans, a lot of Republicans think Democrats are cucks because they are like anti-white and that they're cucking for POC or something like that. But all that is like mostly a sideshow. I mean, there's some elements of that, but most of that is just theater. It's not real anyway, so it doesn't have any meaning. It's just people pretending they give a shit about black people or pretending they give a shit about people of color for the cameras, but they really don't. They're really just college, you know, college trained parasitic fucking imperialist capitalists who pose as leftists because that's what you do nowadays. That's what you're supposed to do. Um, you know, like ever since the American Revolution, it's been very difficult in the U.S. to be openly right wing and to be like, you know, because the real right wing means you basically are against democracy or against rights. It means royalism. I mean, originally, like right wing means royalism. It means you support the Hanoverian, you know, or the House of Bourbon or whatever it was. Um, but I mean, if we could recruit people like Kyle Rittenhouse, like Kyle Rittenhouse says that he supports Black Lives Matter, right? So this is like exactly our target demographic. I mean, I don't know. For the people who just think like, oh, we can again, like that we can win without winning over white people who are not already on our side. You're living in a fairy tale land, or unless you know something I don't, unless there's some strategy I've not seen. If there's a strategy where we could just win with like the 0.5% of people who actually are opposed, openly opposing like tyranny and want like, I don't know. Like, I feel like we have to win over people. We need to expand beyond the whatever small percentage of genuine leftists or genuine like black nationalists or anybody. There's no like segment that can win that I know of. If they can, good, but I don't think any faction can win unless we can expand, and expanding means winning over people like Kyle Rittenhouse, who, like he said, supports Black Lives Matter. He supports it, right? um, He supports the goals. He was even helping protesters that were injured as a medic at the protest. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Is he like an angel? Is he a saint? I don't know. It seemed like the people who chased him were scum, and the reason that they're scum is not only because they're pedophiles and like wife beaters and etc., but the reason they're scum is because they're chasing this guy like any real leftist. If they had a real leftist bone in their body, even a small leftist ligament in their fucking being, they would have seen this guy and said, "Oh well, here's this guy. He's here. He's with us. He's not an obvious lefty. He's not a like stereotypical lefty, but he's standing here and he's not here yelling racist stuff. He's not All he's doing is trying to like protect property of like people of color against these white and Jewish like rioters. Um, any real leftist with any leftist like bone in their body would see that and say, cool, let's recruit this guy. Let's talk to him. Let's see, maybe we can find common ground. That's the huge difference between a real leftist and almost all actual self proclaimed leftists who are mostly all fake scum. Like, I hate that that's the case. Like, I'm not saying this because I want this to be the case at all, because I grew up hoping that the left was real. Like, I was like, oh, yeah, there's a whole group of people that are against tyranny and they're for justice. Awesome. Lo and behold, there's not. There's not. There's a bunch of scum, a bunch of LARPers, and then there's like five people that actually believe in it, including me and Jimmy Dore. Like, so like Kyle Rittenhouse, I mean, maybe we should, do we call it leftism? I think we should call it leftism. Like, I will never concede leftism. I will never cede leftism to the fucking SJWs or the shit libs. Not once. I don't give a shit. Like, I know a lot of people just think, well, as soon as the common, as soon as regular people have a misconception, you should just go with the misconception and just use whatever the words are that people think they mean. But no, like, I'm never going to accept that leftism supposedly now means you're pro corporate and pro authoritarian. No, leftism means liberty, equality, fraternity. It will always fucking mean that. There will always be people who lie about it and pretend it means some fucking authoritarian shit, but they will always be scum. They will always be liars. Leftism means freedom, and I think we should definitely reach out to people like Kyle Rittenhouse, um, And we should reach out to anybody that is like disgusted by the media, disgusted by the government. Um, you know, I don't know. I mean, a part of me almost wishes we could have a civil war just because there's so many people that are so evil. Like clearly want like they want everybody that doesn't think like them to die just because they're, anybody who's not an authoritarian scumbag like them, they want basically dead. Like I would at least love to see all those people fucking deported or something. But at the very least we can identify them and we can build solidarity with people who are not like them and with decent people. And yeah, I mean, like, I think it's a great sign that Jimmy Dore has come around on this issue. I think he's probably partly influenced by his viewers because there's probably his I think a lot of his viewers are more radical than him. In fact, I know they are. um, but like, imagine if we could recruit all the Kyles of this country and of the world to a real left, and something totally divorced and distinct from all this shitlib scum and SJWs who are trolling him. Just have the leftists who are based like Jimmy, like Glenn Greenwald, like you know whoever else, and people like Kyle who are not leftists but have potential. Um, and maybe a bunch of like totally apolitical people that we could bring in, because that's our only hope. There's no hope to win over the authoritarian trash who inhabit the Democratic Party and people who watch like CNN. I mean, we could do it, yeah, try like everything, right? But I would see there's much more hope in winning over people like Kyle Rittenhouse, or like anybody who's not like a mainstream news, um, you know, zombie is is a much better candidate to be a comrade, whether they consider themselves conservative, liberal, radical, centrist. I really don't give a shit. At the end of the day, any of them are better than anybody who fucking follows the mainstream media or the Democratic Party. You know, I mean, I hope that they're waking up about Trump. I think a lot of them have woken up about Trump, but there's still some trying to cling to some fucking fantasy